Okay, welcome everyone. Sorry for a little bit of a delay. We are, let's see, I think, Senator Titus, are you on a time frame? You're on the floor. Okay, then we'll do you first. Okay, very good. Does the Senate have a tight time frame? No. Okay, all right. So, okay, welcome everyone to House Judiciary Committee, Monday, March 9th. Hope everyone had a nice weekend. Glad to see everybody. We will go ahead and have our informational hearing on, well, we'll hear from Senator Titus. And do we have a bill number? Yes, there you have a bill number, but it's not been referred to our committee or anything yet, so got it. Okay, we'll start with that, and then committee, after that, we will work one bill. So we're gonna go ahead and please come forward, Senator Titus. Thank you for coming and tell us about what we need to know about this bill that will be on the way.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Judiciary Committee. Kenny Titus, State Senator for the 18th District. Appreciate the opportunity to appear before your committee today. So the topic today is Senate Bill 523. This bill deals with the Kansas Emergency Management Act and specifically deals with the World Cup disaster declaration that passed through the House. We did some review on that, and there were concerns raised that the World Cup event in and of itself did not meet the statutory definition of a disaster, and that we needed to take a closer look at that. And so I'll give you a brief summary of 523 and tell you about the changes. We did pass it out of our Judiciary Committee this morning, so over in the Senate. But the idea of this bill is we need a more limited authority to deal with these large pre-planned events. And so we define what an extraordinary event is, which includes but is not limited to the World Cup hosted by so-and-so, the Olympics, the Super Bowl, a national political convention, or an event that is similar in scope and size with respect to attendance and security requirements. Then the bill would allow the governor, just as she does now, to issue a declaration for a need for expanded security requirements. That would be good for 15 days. And then the LCC would have the option, as it's written in the bill, to extend that up to 150 days. The bill also outlines the specific authorities that would be needed. So it allows for the coordination of emergency sources. You can stand up the State Emergency Operations Center, coordinate other entities' resources, request federal aid, but it does not allow the governor to waive regulations or any of the broader authorities that exist in KEMA. It's specifically narrowly tailored to deal with security for these large events. And so, and then the other primary piece of this would be that we put on an expiration date of July 1, 2027 with the idea that we're doing this in a hurry. Let's get through the World Cup. We can bring everyone in next legislative session, review if this worked, and then we can make adjustments and either make it permanent or get rid of it as needed. The idea for this really came from other states have something like this. So Kansas just hasn't hosted a lot of these events on this scale, but Texas, Georgia, right, states that have these large facilities already have smaller versions of this built into their Emergency Management Act. I would say you'll see it when the bill posts. We did make several clarifying amendments. We did reduce in committee the 150 days to 90 days. And I believe Revisor Long might have a copy of those amendments if you want to see them ahead of time. We did make a couple clarifications as well for terms, and then we also made sure it was clear that we could access the state emergency fund during the time period of the declaration as well. So I can get into I did provide testimony that does explain the legal rationale of why we need to do something besides the existing Emergency Management Act. I'm happy to answer questions from everyone except Representative Carmichael about that. And just kidding, happy to. But that's just sort of the gist. And so obviously there's a tight time frame on this. And so I wanted to come over and explain why we put this together and answer any questions about how it's set up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Before we take questions, so do I understand that that Jason Long, the revisor, did this? Or Natalie did it. Okay, so I should have asked you to do a brief of the bill ahead of time. Yes, we all have it, but you usually explain it to us. So why don't we go ahead and ask questions of Senator Titus? But then I think I will have you just fill in anything, and maybe people could ask you questions too, Jason, if they needed to. And then the last thing I want to say is, if you all remember, the Judiciary is the committee that dealt with KEMA. And so that's why this is coming to the Kansas Emergency Management Act. That's why this bill is coming to Judiciary, which I think some of you are asking, why are we getting this time? And that's the reason why. So, okay, questions for Senator Titus. Representative Carmichael. Sorry.
The opportunity, Madam Chair, the opportunity to inquire of a legislator who has forsaken the House for that dark place across the rotunda is an opportunity not to let get by. Did you say that this bill was heard in Judiciary this morning in the Senate?
We held a hearing last Thursday, and then we passed it out of committee this morning.
Okay, you passed it out of committee this morning, so it's got to make its way to the Senate floor presumably, and if we follow regular order, then it will come over here and hopefully the speaker will send it to us. Is that your understanding of procedurally what's going on here?
I believe so.
Okay. Yes, I was here when we did all of that work during the COVID disaster and rewriting FEMA from top to bottom. And some of my colleagues might note that I actually voted against the resolution when it came across the floor in the House because of the same sort of concerns that I heard you express with the existing statute. And so with that, I don't have any additional questions for you, Senator Titus, excuse me.
I think you got off well. Other questions? Representative Osman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it's not a question, but, well, it is a question, but it's a question to the committee. Because it's passed out of the Senate this morning with an amendment, I just wanted to make sure, does everybody have the amendment that came through Senate committee this morning? Okay.
It's on the S drive,
Okay.
the as amended. Yep. Okay, great.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Titus. One question, I know with the resolution that did pass, one thing that folks were looking at potentially addressing is temporarily unifying like practices or state regulations around like housing and Airbnbs and how cities address them all independently differently. So maybe during the World Cup, that would be temporarily uniform. Do you know, with the way that this is currently worded, would that prohibit something like that? I know that was a specific need that needed to potentially be addressed.
Thank you, Representative Vaughn, for the question. It should not, because the governor's not waiving any of those regulations. I believe there's a specific legislation dealing with each one of those. So there shouldn't be any impacts like that.
Okay, great. Any other questions for the senator? Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming and helping out with this. Okay, and I will ask Jason to go ahead and do a brief for us about it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson, Office of Revisor of Statutes. So you have the bill brief on 523. I just took what Natalie presented to the Senate committee and put it in your format. And so I won't cover that because Senator Titus kind of addressed that. But I will give you a little procedure. So the Senate this morning, what he didn't mention was that they worked 523 and amended it a couple of times, and then they actually placed it in a House shell. So, and it's currently not up yet, but the report has been turned in, because if you look at 2212, you'll see that it's now Senate substitute for House Bill 2212, and it's the title of this bill. The PDF's just not up yet. So you'll be looking for 2212 when you're looking for the bill. So procedurally speaking, to fill in where Representative Carmichael was headed, if it comes to you as Senate Bill 2212, the opportunity for the House would be either in conference committee, through a motion non-concur and put it in conference, or just a motion to concur. So that's procedurally where you'll be if the Senate passes it across the floor. You have the balloon amendment, and I could briefly tell you a couple of the things that were in it, just so you kind of understand how it's different. One thing kind of done throughout is, rather than just calling it enhanced security, it's enhanced public safety and security. So that is one change you'll see if you look at the new version. Senator Titus referenced the change from its line 17, 150 days was in the original bill, and that was reduced to 90 days. And then there was a clarifying sentence added after line 19 about the Legislative Coordinating Council can meet to discuss all of these extraordinary event declarations that might exist, regardless of whether the legislature is in session or not in session. You may recall from our emergency management discussions, which I try to block out, but here we are. There was some concern about what the LCC can do within a session versus when you're not in session, and so this makes it clear they have that authority no matter what's going on in the legislative process. Then it looks like on page 2 of the bill, they added a new power. There's a new subparagraph E. So the governor would be allowed to make requests to the State Finance Council for funding from the State Emergency Fund. So that would be one additional power that's added. And then the last thing they did, it looks like, made the act part of the KEMA, Kansas Emergency Management Act. So it would be placed in with those statutes and then pick up all of the related definitions, duties of the Adjutant General, Emergency Management Department, all that, right? It would integrate it into the existing structure better with a formal statutory placement. So those are the amendments as I understand it, and what you would see later today in House Bill 2212, if you wanted to pull that up. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I do appreciate some of the explanation. I think the procedural part is knowing that the session is wrapping up. That's why they put it in the Senate bill. Hence, that's why we're having the hearing today, so that we can ask our questions and we can actually have a true hearing. So that's what this is about. Do you recall, Alfan, I'm sure you do, but just kind of for people as a reminder and maybe for new people, there's 2 different groups that are mentioned in the amendments: the LCC, Legislative Coordinating Council, and also the State Finance Council. So could you just remind the committee who is on each one of those and what the difference is?
Madam Chair, I'm more familiar with the LCC. So let me look real quick.
Okay, while you're looking, I will just tell the committee, if you recall, generally the LCC doesn't meet when the legislature is in session. They have met one time that I remember, but what was it for? Something very extraordinary. It was, gosh, I can't recall what it was. But anyway, so that's why they put in here that they shall meet to discuss extensions if they need to, whether or not the legislature is in session. But so, okay, the LCC.
So, Madam Chair, yeah, the LCC, that's the majority leader and, so the speaker, the majority leader, the minority leader, and then on the House, the Senate side, the president, the majority leader, and the minority leader. I know those 6. I'm trying to remember who else, but essentially leadership on both sides,
Yep.
right? And you alternate chair and vice chair depending on the year, so.
Okay. And then the State Finance Council, I believe the governor is on the State Finance Council.
Governor is the chair of the Finance Council. And then I know from a couple of those meetings recently that the president and the speaker are on there. I believe both minority leaders are on there as well. But it's chaired by the governor, and so it's a little.
And is the chair of appropriations and the chair of Ways and Means on that committee? I think they are.
I believe so.
Yeah, okay.
I was trying to find them, the search feature on.
Okay,
our
anyway, it's
right
2
now.
separate groups, just so, the committee is kind of a reminder about those things. Okay, other questions for Jason? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jason. Could you describe a little bit more about the State Emergency Fund? what that is, how, is there a balance in it now, that sort of stuff? Thank you.
So Madam Chair, I would defer to our fiscal staff, who would be able to get you anything about the actual funding. And I do not know anything about the emergency fund. I know it's a statutory fund. I'm just seeing if I can find anything about it right now. No, nothing's coming up. Again, our search feature is horrible. I don't know what changed, but we're trying to address that.
And maybe we could, if you think you might could take a look at that and then after the hearing or something, give us a little bit of an answer. Okay. Or after we work the bill. Okay, that's great. Good question.
I was hoping you would have some folks from emergency management or the adjutant general that might be able to give you some of those logistical details too, so.
Okay, great. Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jason. I think kind of my main question, so going this route of creating this, new type of an event, an extraordinary event, how does that, what, high level, what authorities are not included in this that are otherwise included in the FEMA Act? So I understand how this doesn't really meet the definition of the FEMA, but kind of how are the authorities changing or similar?
Madam Chair, Representative, so yeah, the only powers granted by this act are the ones enumerated there in subsection C. So it would be A, B, C, D, and then there's a new E that I mentioned about the emergency funds. Under 48.925, the governor has several powers that can be exercised, suspending rules and regulations related to certain businesses or other agencies. Utilizing, let's see, I don't want to say anything that's not included in the bill because I didn't actually compare which ones. So C1A about utilizing resources, that's the same actually as in 48.925, but not able to suspend rules and regulations. So I don't see that one. Transferring supervision of certain agencies, departments for these purposes, that is consistent with KEMA 48.925. The power to utilize private property necessary to cope with the disaster. That is a power not granted by this act, but is in 48.925. Directing or compelling evacuation. That is in 925, but not in here. Suspending or limiting the sale of alcoholic beverages, explosives, and combustibles. That's over in 48.925. And there's probably more, but those are just a few that I was getting to as I was doing the review here. Temporary emergency housing, that would be a power over there that's not here. So you can kind of see where those powers are headed, right? Those are more related to typically either a natural disaster is typically how you see it, or in the case of the COVID, pandemic, a public health emergency. So,
Representative Vaughn, you have a follow-up?
Sorry, what was that statute number one more time if we wanted to look at it?
48.925, 48-925. And it's referenced in the bill, so specifically like on page 2, line 7, because the bill tries to specifically say a proclamation under this statute does not authorize the exercise of any power described in 48-925 other than the ones described in this bill. So it's very explicitly trying to limit the powers and distinguish it from that statute, but then also say if those powers are needed and there is a reason to declare an actual disaster emergency, nothing limits the governor's authority to do that under 48.924 and 925. So it could go that direction if it becomes necessary. It's just, this is step 1.
Thank you.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and please rely on research and not me. But I think that Federal Emergency Management Fund consists of several $1 million, and I cannot remember how many. And it is used in particular to bridge the gap between when we have an emergency in Kansas and when reimbursement arrives from FEMA. We need to spend the money for wildland fire suppression, whatever it is, or a tornado or a flood or all those other things. And so they have that pool of money. And as I recall, most of it gets reimbursed eventually when the FEMA disaster declaration comes through and they approve the funds. But I think we also replenish that fund every year as part of the appropriations process. I'm not on appropriations, somebody else could tell me, but I think we keep it filled up to a certain level, and I think it's between $1 and $10 million, something like that. But again, I'm not certain of that, but conceptually, that's what it is, and that's what it's been used for historically.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And if you hear something different, Jordan or Natalie, you can let us know. Okay, any other questions for the revisor? Okay, thank you, Jason.
If I could guide them a
Yes,
little bit,
mhm.
the state emergency fund is established in 75-7312. So that's where it's created statutorily, and then that might help them find balances and other information. So at least found that. Took a little while.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything else? Anything else about now what has become sub for House Bill 2212? Any other questions? Okay, we'll close that informational hearing then. Thank you, everyone, for that. This is good. Appreciate the senator bringing it and learning about that. Okay, committee, we now are going to work Senate Bill 358. Senate Bill 358. It's the only one that we're going to work today. Okay, do we have amendments on Senate Bill 358? Okay, okay, yeah, Representative Carmichael, go ahead. Well,
I do have an amendment,
Okay,
just whenever
go
you
ahead.
want to run it in sequence, I just, I mean, mine's obviously fairly substantive and not procedural in nature, so.
Well, let's just go ahead and tackle it.
Okay.
Mhm.
With the chair's leave, could I ask the revisor's office to distribute the amendment to members of the committee? With your leave, Madam Chair, it might make more sense for me to address the bill and the amendment all at the same time, if that's.
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay,
Yep.
great. We heard testimony on this bill, some very emotional and moving testimony from some people who are entitled, obviously, to some sort of vindication. It should not have happened that the judge released Mr. Peterson following the jury's verdict. My information, I think that we obtained in the hearing, was that the following day, the county attorney filed a motion for a departure, an upwards departure, in essence, to put this person in jail for longer. And as I understand it, at that time, Judge Bannister did remand him to custody, where last I knew, he was still in the county jail, although he may have been sentenced now and gone on state penitentiary. But I think the concern, and justifiably so, of the proponents of the bill and the conferees was that this was a multiple charge sex offender, 54 counts, I think, that had been found guilty. And the person was allowed to go home that night rather than being remanded to custody. And as I said, he was remanded to custody the next day. We didn't get a briefing from the revisor, though, did we?
We did not.
And I think we'd rather have the revisor brief than me, because I was getting ready to brief. I think you'd prefer to hear it from an expert.
Okay, yep, thank you for that. Jason, could we get a reminder brief on Senate Bill 358?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was waiting to see who the expert was. So,
It's you.
all right, great. No pressure. No, so this is the bill about release of persons after conviction. So this is the criminal procedure statute that allows a judge to decide whether the person will be released pending sentencing or held in custody pending sentencing. And also whether that person will be in custody pending appeal or not. So it's kind of both of those post-conviction appeal bond is what we're talking about. And the bill provides that if a person is convicted of an off-grid felony or a severity level 1 through 4 felony or a drug grid level 1 or 2 felony, the person essentially will, be released on bond prior to trial. Or if they were released on bond prior to their trial, it will be immediately revoked and they'll be held in custody in the county jail until sentencing. Or if they were not out on bond and being held in custody, they will remain in custody pending sentencing.
Okay, any questions for the revisor? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, so the original text described non-drug grid felonies, but in the amendment, it just says off-grid. Is there does it include non-drug and drug grid?
Madam Chair, Representative Keen, aye. The purpose of saying non-drug grid and drug grid in the underlying bill is because both were included, but once you were removing, and I think Representative Carmichael was going to get to this, once you were limiting it to off-grid and non-drug level 1 through 4s, there was no reason to specify non-drug or drug. If we say severe level 1 through 4, we mean non-drug grid. We don't have to say non-drug grid. So the purpose of the amendment is to remove the drug grid entirely from the bill and also to limit to sex offenses, which is what you're about to hear, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, Representative Carmichael, you proceed.
Representative Schreiber has a good eye. He detected what I'm up to. But I do want to return to the circumstance that brought us here, and that is the seemingly inexplicable release of someone who had just been convicted of 54 substantial sex crimes. There was question raised during our discussions, I think it was by Representative Lewis, about Judge Bannister, the sentencing judge, and how he came to office, et cetera. Maybe there was some concern expressed about judicial selection. Our researchers were good enough to retrieve the relevant information. Judge Bannister was appointed by Judge Brownback to replace Judge Stutzman, and that happened back in 2016. Judge Bannister's been on the bench, I believe, then since 17, I believe. He stood for retention election 1 year after his appointment in November of 18 and garnered 79.8% of his constituents' affirmative vote to continue in the position. 4 years later, he was again retained by his constituents with 78.78% of the voters voting to retain him. Then we have this incident, and I can't remember the date of the sentencing, and he is next due to face the voters should he file for retention in November of 2026. So at least that gives you his history. Now, what the amendment that I'm offering proposes is to, in essence, make this offense match the testimony of the conferees that we heard. All of them were rightfully complaining about someone convicted of multiple sex offenses. The bill as originally drafted and as the reviser and Representative Schreiber pointed out, it included drug felonies, certain categories of drug felonies, and it also probably includes some forms of aggravated battery and maybe some types of murder / manslaughter. So what this amendment does, and I first start out with Ms. Scott and then Mr. Thompson assisted me in the end, this limits this special rule to the sex offenses described in Article 55, Chapter 21 of the Kansas statutes annotated. And that's where the crimes and penalties are described. I thought if we were going to take this extraordinary measure in response to this extraordinary circumstance, that we ought to limit it to the circumstances that were before us. And if we find that judges somewhere are making terribly foolish bond decisions about people who manufacture drugs, then that's a subject, in my judgment, for a different day. And I checked with Mr. Barry Wilkerson, the county attorney over in Manhattan, to make sure that our revisers had accomplished the assignment. And he tells me that indeed it does limit the impact of this bill to sex offenders. It encompasses all of the offenses with which Mr. Peterson was charged and convicted. I would say out of fairness, Mr. Wilkinson did point out that it does not include the categories I said before of some drug offenders, some ag batteries, and maybe some forms of murder. His offhand remark to me was those people are probably already in jail. But at any rate, it does not go that far, whereas the original bill does. And so that's what the amendment is about. I'm not entirely pleased with the amendment because the case that we had was 54 counts. I mean, that's as terrible a sex offender as you could think of. This special sentencing rule, even under my amendment, would still apply to only one count falling within these types of crimes. That may be appropriate. That may be what we want to do. And so I didn't try to limit it to a number of offenses. I just said it's got to be one of the sex offenses in order for this rule to apply. That's what the amendment is about. If someone wants to second it, if someone doesn't, I'll sleep well tonight knowing I tried.
We'll do questions first before we have you make your motion. Okay, do you have any questions for Representative Carmichael? Questions? Okay, a question or comment?
Really a question.
Yeah,
Um,
Representative Lewis.
Right, so Representative Carmichael, you said that if we pass the bill as amended or as the original, that it would be, I think you used the word extraordinary, and you may be right, but explain why you think this is such an extraordinary step by the legislature.
The reason that I refer to it as extraordinary is it's probably in response to an extraordinary circumstance. I've never heard of someone being convicted of 54 sex crimes and not being locked up that very day. And I cannot speak for Judge Bannister, and he can't speak for himself because, as we all know, that would be inappropriate for a judge to come here and justify and explain why he sentenced the way he did. But when I say extraordinary, my real thought is this is in response to an extraordinary circumstance, and making what in essence is a special sentencing rule, I think may well be appropriate in view of this circumstance.
Might I?
Representative Lewis.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess what I see in the bill, apart from granted the extraordinary circumstance here, is something that's pretty non-extraordinary, if that's the right word, that if somebody is convicted of a very serious offense, whether it's sex offense or drug offense or manslaughter or murder, what have you, that after the conviction, they should be held pending sentencing. So to my mind, we're not doing anything extraordinary, I guess, and my question, so that's where.
To respond, Madam Chair, there are a number of defendants, as I'm sure you know, who are released following conviction on bail or bond or otherwise pending sentencing. But I doubt that you find very many multiple crime sex offenders who are being released, but that is what apparently happened here for a period of perhaps 24 hours. And so maybe extraordinary is not the word, but I can see the merit in these people being locked up after sentencing, if for no other reason, because no matter what you tell me, I'm going to think they're inherently a flight risk. If you're looking the rest of your life in the penitentiary for sex crimes, I would say you're ipso facto a flight risk. I might also add that I did make inquiry of, I believe it was the revisor at the time, as to whether or not the constitutional right to bail, which we have in the Kansas Bill of Rights, certainly is applicable here. And I believe Mr. Milholland, I think he found the case of State v. Gordon, if I remember. Maybe it was one of the other people, but State v. Gordon, to my mind, made it pretty clear that there is not a constitutional right to bail in this circumstance. There's also a decision by Judge Crow in the Federal District Court for Kansas that so holds. So my concern that I had at the time is no longer a concern from my perspective.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have you make your motion, but Jason Thompson, the revisor, would like to make a comment first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So diving back into that discussion about the non-drug drug reference, I conferred with one of my other colleagues and looked at some of the usage, and I think we probably want the word non-drug before severity, just to make it crystal clear and make it consistent. So before the maker of the motion made the motion, I wanted to make sure that he made it with the word non-drug severity level 1 through 4.
So on the third line, off-grid felony or
Or a non-drug severity level 1 through 4.
Or,
It just
okay.
makes it crystal clear. We don't have to call it the non-drug grid or the drug grid, but we probably do need the word non-drug just to make it clear.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. All right, Representative, would you like to make your motion?
Yes, I would move that we adopt the amendment before the chair with the modification that in the balloon that we insert on the third line, non-drug between the word A and the word severity.
Okay, do we have a second? Representative Martinez, seconds. Okay, comments on the amendment. Comments on the amendment. I'm going to go ahead, well, Representative Barrett, you go ahead, and then I'll comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I mean, I'll vote for this with or without the amendment, but I guess my concern is that there are some very severe crimes that potentially, again, I agree that it's probably very rare that this would happen, that could be included. So like aggravated robbery is a level 3. Aggravated robbery is when you use a firearm to rob an establishment, or there are certain types of murder that's level 2 if it's done recklessly. There's attempted murder is a level 1 that'd be included. I mean, it's aggravated domestic battery when great bodily harm used with a weapon. So there are a lot of severe crimes that are non-sexual. But again, I mean, I would agree with the representative that that's probably very rare. That probably never happens, but I would rather that those be included.
Okay, Representative Vaughn. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the primary point I agree with the bringer of the amendment is I think it's really hard to evaluate the merits of including the other crimes just because, you know, we don't know how common that is. And then, I mean, primarily we just didn't hear testimony on it. It was, from what I remember, really narrowed to sex offenses. And I think it's clear that like this change does need to be made in that regard. But I think it's hard to say in regards to the other crimes just because we didn't hear any testimony on that. So I do think I'm in support of the amendment because I think it narrowly tailors it. And the other thing I was looking at, I don't think we received a bed impact statement on this bill. I think this would potentially narrow that as well for potential any potential bed impact this may have. I think it just kind of keeps it narrow while also accomplishing the goal of the bill. So with that, I do stand in support of the amendment.
Committee, I also call you, I think all of you have your sentencing grid, which I think this is the exact sort of bill that it's good that we have the sentencing grid. I would like to draw your attention to what is a non-drug level 1 through 4. Pretty much it's definite, well, it's presumptive imprisonment always. And then only if there's no record, 1 or 2 misdemeanors, does it even border the border box. So it's presumptive prison all the way. And for me, I was surprised when we heard the testimony that if I think the word that is the most persuasive here for me is the word convicted, that if a person has been convicted of any of these crimes, then their bond is revoked. And that makes perfect sense to me because they're not innocent until proven guilty. They have been proven guilty. And so again, I will vote for this bill with or without the amendment. I think it's very good that you brought it. I'm thankful. I had no idea this was the situation, but I'm in favor of leaving it because I think even though we didn't hear testimony on it, I'm in favor of, I should say, leaving it the way it is. Because when you look at the sentencing grid, just the way that it is presumptive imprisonment, I think it makes sense. But again, I'll let you vote the way that you would like to, Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, just to follow up, I mean, if you look at your grid and you look, let's just start with the non-drug offense, and you go far to the right, that's somebody with no record or misdemeanor. So the lightest sentence possible would be 38 months, and the highest would be 165. And that once again presumes that this person has a clean record. You can see as his or her previous crimes go up, the sentencing in the 1 through 4 is very significant. And then if you turn to the drug side of the equation, you're talking about levels 1 to 2. And once again, you go over to the no record or misdemeanor, one misdemeanor, and you're looking at 92 months at the lowest, and that's 7, 8 years. So and it is a presumptive sentence to imprisonment. So that's what is in the original bill, and the amendment, of course, limits that to sex offenses 1 through 4. So I'll oppose the amendment.
Any other comments on the amendment? Okay, Representative, would you like to close on your amendment?
I would, Madam Chair. We've had discussions in this legislature, certainly in the Corrections Committee and also in this committee, and in previous sessions, about the fact that we've only got so much room in the jailhouse. And this, by the way, is not a department. The reason there's not a bed impact statement from Department of Corrections, these folks are housed in the county jail. And as best I could tell from talking with people, we don't contact all of the county jails to see what impact it might have upon them. And so that's why we don't have a bed impact. The reason, though, that I think we ought to be restraining or limiting this to sex offenses is, first, I know that that's what we've been working on in our committees this year and for the past 2 years. We've done a lot of necessary changes with sex offenses that are going to have the impact of putting more people in prison without letting more people out of prison. And the end result is, I'm afraid, eventually we're going to have to spend money not only to replace Hutchinson, but probably to build 1, if not 2, additional prisons. And so we have to be careful about locking people up because it makes, and I'm not saying this bill, but because as a general principle, it makes us feel better, makes us feel safer. Those people typically get out someday, and then we may not be safer. But I would remind you of the testimony, and I think it was from BIDS, and it may have been written only, that at least in that practitioner's experience, and I don't think anyone had any information to the contrary, roughly 20% of the people who fell within the scope of the original bill end up being paroled out without actually going to prison for these offenses because of downward departures. And I'm sure that we're talking about the people that are over there far on the right side. I think, I don't have my grid in front of me, but I think it's the people over there on the right side. And my guess is that it's probably the folks who are drug offenders, but I'm not sure. But if you're going to be releasing 20% of these people, and historically you know that you release 20% of the people under the bill as originally framed, then a mandatory thou shalt receive no bail bill doesn't make much sense, because as soon as they are sentenced, then they're put on the street instead. And I'm not sure that you always want to put somebody in the county jail in that circumstance, and you need to preserve a little bit of discretion to the court. I don't want to take more of your time. I appreciate you all hearing the argument out and the discussion, and I will be the one who will support the bill with the amendment, but would reluctantly be unable to support the bill without it, because I think its scope is much broader than the testimony that we had from the victims of Mr. Pennington. Thank you. Move my amendment.
Okay, thank you. Committee, you've heard the motion to amend Senate Bill 358 by the Carmichael Amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. I'm afraid I'm going to have to. Chair is in doubt. Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, all those opposed. Okay, I think it was 7 to 9, and so the amendment fails. All right, we're back on the bill. Senate Bill 358. I usually have my vice chair. Do I have a, if you would like to, yeah, we're ready to have a motion on Senate Bill 358.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we move Senate Bill 358 favorably out of committee.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Representative Bohai. Okay, any other discussion on Senate Bill 358? Representative Carmichael.
Madam Chair, as much as I would like to support my friend Representative Alhauden's bill, especially at his first appearance in our council, reluctantly, I'm unable to do so, but sorry, buddy.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing none, would you like to close, Representative?
I close.
Okay, thank you. You've heard the motion to pass Senate Bill 358 favorably for passage. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, we have passed Senate Bill 358 favorably. Representative Carmichael would like his no vote recorded. Representative Martinez would like her no vote recorded. Anyone else? Okay, thank you and welcome. We're so happy to have Representative Van Houten with us today. We appreciate you stepping in and taking part. My pleasure. Yes, okay. All right, anything else? Committee, I would like to let you know that we did amend the agenda for this week. We will not be having a bill hearing on Senate Bill 413 on Wednesday. We're not having that hearing. And but tomorrow we have 2 bill hearings, and then I would like to work some of the bills that we've heard, and then what we don't get worked, we'll try to work on Wednesday, and then if we get all that done, we will not meet on Thursday or Friday. So that would be the goal. If you need, if you all would like to take down numbers on what bills that we might work. Okay, possibly we have Senate Bill 408, Senate Bill 398, Senate Bill 427, 481, and 480. And then, and also Senate Bill 462, which we will have an amendment on that one. And then we will have 2 bill hearings tomorrow, but I'll let you know more about those after we have the hearings. So those are possibilities. Tomorrow, we might get a couple of the easy ones done and then work a little bit harder on Wednesday to get everything passed out. Okay, any other comments? Yes, okay, tomorrow we're going to approve a set of minutes. So make sure that you diligently read every word of those minutes tonight so you can approve them tomorrow. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you. I think you said we're going to work, no, we're not going to have a hearing on 413.
You're not.
Do you have in front of you what we're going to work tomorrow, just so I can get my list? Not work, what we're going to hear. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Oh, what we're hearing tomorrow, yes. What we're hearing tomorrow is 463 and 426.
Thank you.
That's the 2 that we're hearing tomorrow. Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just thinking, it's a very special day for our vice chair substitute.
Is
If you
it?
look at him, and I think we all wish him a happy birthday.
What? Okay, should we sing? It was Saturday?
Thank you.
Okay, we won't sing since it's not the actual day, but, okay. I hope you had a great day.
I had a great day.
Okay,
Holding on to
good.
my 40s with 365 more days.
Ah, okay, okay. All right, thank you.